This is Unit 5, Lesson 7, and we're going to talk about different ways to graph a line. So the first way that we're going to review, these are all types of lines that you've seen already earlier in this unit or in Unit 4. So the first way we're going to review is if you have a line that looks like this. So it's something x plus something y equals a number. And the general form we sometimes call that is a times x plus b times y equals c. But really it's like you've got your x's and y's on one side equals a number on the other side. And the best way to graph these ones is to look at the x and y intercepts. So for your x-intercept, we know that any point along this x-axis has a y value of 0. So I always like to write this down to help me remember what I'm doing. So 3x plus 4y equals 24 is my equation. Now, sometimes when I'm teaching this in person, we just kind of look at what would happen if the y equaled 0. Here, I would get 4 times 0. So I might cover that up with my finger and say, hey, 4 times 0 is 0. So I would just be left with 3x equals 24. Here, what I might kind of do is, let's see if I can kind of just highlight over and say, hey, I'm going to ignore the 4y because I'm going to make that be a 0. So I have 3x equals 24. To get x by itself, I divide both sides by 3. So I get x equals 8. So when I'm going to graph this line, I'm going to count over to 8 in the x direction. And I think that's it at 8. I hope I've counted correctly there. And put a dot. Then I'm going to go back to my equation. And now I want to find the y-intercept. And where the y-intercept is, we know x equals 0. So again, the y-intercept is on the vertical y-axis, and all of these points on this axis have an x value of 0. So we've got our equation 3x plus 4y equals 24. And again, we kind of want to ignore if x equals to 0, 3 times 0 is 0. So that's just gone. And you can kind of block that out, or like I said, sometimes I kind of cover that up with my finger to see what's left in the equation, and it's 4y equals 24. Then we're going to divide both sides by 4, so I get y equals 6. Switching colors again, I'm going to go up 6 in the y direction, up to positive 6, and put a dot there. Now, unfortunately, it's not as easy for me to use a ruler on this, so I'm going to freehand this as best I can, but you guys please use a ruler when you're doing this to connect your dots, your x-intercept and your y-intercept, and then we want to label that with our equation. So 3x plus 4y equals 24. So that's the new type of graphing that we did in Unit 5. The next example here, this is a y equals mx plus b. So this is a line that you actually would have graphed a bunch like this in Unit 4. So remember that m was our slope or our rate of change, and b was our y-intercept or our initial value. So for this one, if I take a look at this, I have two important pieces here. So this is my slope or rate of change. So -3 over 1. I always want it as a fraction. So this is my rise over run. So this tells me I'm going to count down 3, and run always goes to the right. It's going to the right 1. And then the other piece of information is that I have a positive 8 for my initial, which is also sometimes called the y-intercept. So to graph this, first I start at my initial, so I'm going to go up to a positive 8 in the y direction. That's where I'm my starting point. And then I'm going to kind of make my rate triangle, counting down 3 over 1, and put another point. You can do this a few times, especially if you're worried about drawing it accurately enough. It can help, especially for me because I don't have a ruler on my tablet here, to get a nice straight line through there. Whoops, not as straight as that should have been. But again, you guys use your ruler and draw a nice straight line as well as you can through those points. And then again, we label y equals negative 3x plus 8. The last two examples of lines are our horizontal or our vertical lines. And these ones are actually the easiest ones to do, but they do tend to mix people up because they just look different and you're used to kind of the longer process to graph the other two types. So here, if we have y equals negative 6, the first thing is to go down in the y-axis to where you see negative 6. So that would be negative 6. I'm going to put a dot there. So I'm on the y-axis, and I put a point at negative 6. Now, you might look at this, and here's the big problem. People think, oh, I see a y, so this line must go up and down like the y it goes. But no, that's not how it works. The y means that it crosses the y-axis. So it has to cut across the y-axis, which means it actually goes parallel to that x-axis, which is the opposite of what you might think. And then you just draw this straight horizontal line right across. See, it's the easiest one, but you just have to remember which way it goes. And always remembering that the x equals or y equals means it crosses that axis. The next one, here we've got x equals negative 6. So again, we want to look on the x-axis. So this is x and this is y. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 into the negatives and put a dot at negative 6 on the x-axis. Now again, this x doesn't mean it goes in the same direction as x. It means it crosses the x. So I'm going to go across the x, up and down like that, at this negative 6. And just draw a nice vertical line straight through, and that's as easy as that. So in today's homework, you've got a bunch more examples of graphing. Most of them are using the first two types, but you should make sure that you remember all of the different types of graphing. So again, just flipping back here, you want to be able to graph if it's x's and y's on one side equal a number on the other side. That's when you're going to do your intercepts. If it's a second type, if it says y equals on one side, then you've kind of got your slope and your y-intercept. That's when you use your rate triangle with rise over run from your initial point. And if it says y equals, or it says x equals with just a number, that's the horizontal or vertical line. They're the easiest ones of all. You just remember that it has to go through that point. And that's it for today.